Have you ever noticed that there seem to be certain areas of your life where you never really make progress? You feel like you're working on them, but then you're always just back at the same starting point. It's like you're trying to always lose the last 10 pounds, or you're always starting a new side hustle, but then you just kind of lose steam and you start the next side hustle. Or you always think about quitting your job, but you never actually make the move to leave that job. You just keep thinking about it. And so there's these areas where you just can't really make progress or move forward, and you feel like you're stuck in a pattern and you're stuck in the same cycle, always kind of ending up back at the same place. And if you can just figure this one area out, you're going to feel so much happier, so much more fulfilled, and you're going to feel like you can finally move on with your life. You can finally move on to all those other things that you want to work on, but right now you just feel stuck because you have to tackle this one thing first, and it holds you back from moving on to the next things. And maybe you've gone around in the same repeating cycle so many times that now you're starting to wonder if it's ever going to happen, if it's even possible for you, even though you see other people online who are accomplishing the thing that you want to accomplish. Maybe you're wondering if it's a willpower thing, or maybe it's just not possible for you, and you're really starting to wonder if you're ever going to get this one thing taken care of. And I have been there multiple times in multiple areas of my life, and so I'm going to share with you today what I have learned about these repeating patterns and being stuck in these types of cycles. So think about that one area where you feel like you are stuck and you keep going around in the same cycle, and keep that in mind for the rest of the video. Maybe this is an area where you're always playing small, you're meant for more, you could be doing something bigger, but for whatever reason, you're just stuck in this cycle of playing small. Maybe you have a cycle of staying in your comfort zone. Maybe an area of your life is asking you to change. Maybe your job is no longer fulfilling and you know that you should make this change, but for whatever reason, you just can't quite get there and you're staying stuck in your comfort zone. Maybe you have goals around your diet and your lifestyle, and you've been wanting to lose the same 10, 15, 20 pounds for who knows how long, and it just never really seems to happen. Or maybe you have a cycle of shiny object syndrome where you're always excitedly starting something new, you work at it for a little bit, but eventually it fizzles out and you're on to the next thing, and you're in this repeating cycle of starting and never finishing things. And so whatever you have in mind for this video, whatever area or pattern that you really want to break free from, the most important thing is to assess your level of readiness to actually break out of this cycle. And there's a concept from the book 12-Week Year, and it's this idea of being interested in something versus being committed. And so whatever you're thinking about for this video, whatever pattern it is, it's really important that you're committed to getting out of this cycle and not just interested. And this is something you're going to have to assess for yourself. I can't really tell you how you feel about this certain subject or how ready you feel or how committed you are. This is something that you just kind of know in your heart, in your gut, like this is what feels the most important to me right now. This is where I want to put my focus. This is where I have motivation and energy to really figure out this thing. And this is really important because being interested can get you started on a path, but as soon as that path gets a little rocky, as soon as you hit the first hurdles, then it's very likely that when the going gets tough, you'll make up some excuses and you'll drop off. And that's how the cycle keeps repeating. But if you're committed and you truly know that now is the time, then when those obstacles come up, you're going to have that motivation and that energy to persevere through those obstacles and not just make an excuse to, deal with this later. So what pattern in your life are you truly ready to release at this time? I mentioned a couple things at the beginning of this video, and a couple of those are what I'm really focused on right now. For me, it's health and prioritizing my goals and to stop playing small. I feel like as far as my health goes, for pretty much my entire adult life, as long as I can remember, like from my early 20s, I've always wanted to lose like 10 or 15 pounds. And it's just been something that I've always been trying to do or always been thinking about. And I've sort of gone on and off of all these sorts of diets throughout my 20s And I'm kind of tired of that pattern. It's been a long time, and I'm finally ready to figure out something that sticks and something that's sustainable. And as far as my other goals, playing small is something that I have been working on for a while now as I transitioned from corporate into my own business. And so this is something that I'm tackling, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in the video and give examples along the way. So at this point, you've got the area of your life, the goal, the pattern, whatever it is that you're finally ready to break free from. You've got that in mind, and you know that you're ready to commit to this. You're not just interested, you're committed. And so now the next step is to admit that you are stuck in a cycle here. Admit that you've been going around and maybe doing some variation of the same thing over and over and over again, and you need to break that pattern. And this is a pattern of thoughts and behaviors that have kept you in a cycle, and whatever you've been doing up until this point, it just hasn't been working. From there, it's really important to look at your pattern. Take a good hard look at your pattern and observe how it's currently playing out in your life and how it's played out in the past. This will help you get a better idea of exactly what that cycle looks like. What are the triggers in the cycle? What are kind of the phases of this cycle? Where does it start and where does it end? And where do you eventually kind of fall off track? Think about those sorts of things as you really dive into dissecting what your cycle and what your pattern of behavior and thoughts looks like. And so I have an example when it comes to my health and weight loss, and it's this pattern of kind of being not on a diet and just sort of, eating whatever, gradually gaining weight and getting to a point where I'm like not happy with where things are at. And so that kind of triggers a new cycle where I'm at the point where I'm like ready to do something about it. I'm fed up, whatever. And then I, jump into some sort of fad diet or just like an unhealthy diet pattern where I'm dropping the calories too low and exercising way too much. And so this goes on for a couple weeks or maybe a month, and eventually it's unsustainable. It kind of fizzles out, and I go back to what I was doing before, which is just basically not dieting and generally eating like how I want. And eventually, the cycle starts again where you get kind of fed up with it. And so that's broadly how that cycle goes around. And so whatever cycle you have, it's important to think about that and start to understand like what are the steps that are happening here. And it's important not to just think about kind of the actions that you're taking as you go through this cycle, but think about what your mindset is like at each of these steps as well. When I think about my cycle, when it begins, it's like I'm at a place of being really fed up, really frustrated, kind of desperate, and in a hurry to, lose 10 pounds. And so that mindset is what takes me into the next phase of the cycle. And that mindset is very impatient and just ready to do something quick and look for like a quick fix. And so you can see how that mindset then plays into the actions that I take, which are unsustainable. So as you're thinking about what your pattern of behavior looks like, think about, what are the thoughts and the behaviors that go into this. The next thing that can be really helpful is trying to understand where this pattern started or where this pattern came from. I really like working with Rebecca Campbell's Work Your Light Oracle deck. This is what the deck looks like. And one of the cards in there really struck me when I was reading through the guidebook, when I was thinking about this video, and it's talking about breaking patterns, and it says, "This is why family patterns can be the hardest to break. Often, they are not even ours to begin with. We do not know another way of being, and so we continue playing out the drama." And so if you think about your patterns, maybe the pattern that you have is something that you picked up or learned from your parents, or you just picked it up somewhere along the way, and it's not even really your pattern. You just picked it up and kept doing it, and without thinking about, another way of being, you just kept repeating this pattern. And this is something that I definitely learned growing up. I think that my mother was always kind of in a state of dieting or wanting to be dieting, and that definitely rubbed off on me. And I developed this own pattern of my own, and it kind of just went on like that. And so a lot of this work is breaking the patterns, breaking those familial patterns that we learned and just kind of unconsciously started repeating in our own lives. But you get to a point where you realize that this pattern isn't serving me. This pattern isn't even my own. I want to create a new healthy pattern that serves me in my life. And a quick note, if you're feeling a little impatient at this point in the video because it feels like we're just doing more softer things and just analyzing and not really getting into like the action, that'll come later, but it's so important to really understand the root of your pattern and this cycle so that you can set yourself up for success in the future. You want to really understand where are the places where this breaks down, where are the places where this isn't working, so that you can now intentionally set a new thought pattern, a new behavior pattern that's actually going to see you to the finish line this time. It's kind of like me in my 20s with like the constant dieting or trying different diets all the time. It feels like I'm doing something productive because I'm always starting a new diet. But clearly something is not working. My mindset isn't where it needs to be. I'm choosing the wrong action steps. And so I need to step back, and before I jump into the next diet, I need to really think about, why isn't this working? What am I doing that needs to be changed so that I can actually come up with a plan that's sustainable and works in the long run? And I find, at least in myself, that when I'm kind of at a point where I'm really frustrated with myself and I'm ready to jump into a new cycle and take action to finally hit my goals, whatever it may be, that is not the mindset that you want when you're trying to develop like a plan or, action steps, because that mindset is going to be, rushed, maybe impatient, maybe a little like desperate or panicky. Like it depends on kind of what area of life you're thinking about. Like when it comes to the dieting, it's definitely a very like impatient mindset. But when it came to doing side hustles, when I was doing a lot of side hustling, sometimes it would just be like this kind of panicky energy because it's like, I just need to figure this out because I'm desperate to leave my day job and I just need to have this answer now. And that's just not a productive mindset. And so what I'm trying to do now is slow things down. Let's take a look and come up with a plan that can really work. So another thing that is really important to consider is how this cycle and being stuck in this cycle and actually not reaching your goal has benefited you up until this point. And I know that's something that may sound a little weird. It's like, this isn't benefiting me. I'm tired of this. Like, this is not a fun experience for me. There's no way that there's a benefit. I just want to reach my goals. And every day that I don't, I feel awful. But there actually is a hidden benefit, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And so there is a way that this pattern has served you up until now. And usually the way that they serve us when we're kind of stuck in these patterns that we don't enjoy is that the pattern keeps us safe, it keeps us comfortable or in our comfort zone, and it also keeps us certain. We don't have to deal with any sort of uncertainty, and that is very uncomfortable in itself. So there's another concept from the 12-week year that's really helpful here, and that is called the emotional cycle of change. And this is the cycle of how our emotions will go up and down as we go through the process of creating change in our lives. So the first stage is uninformed optimism. We all know how this feels. We're ready to tackle that next big thing. We've got the idea, we're excited, we're like, this is gonna be great. It's all uninformed optimism because we haven't actually started working on it yet, and we haven't realized the work that actually goes into doing what we wanna do. The next stage is informed pessimism. So you've gotten started, you're starting to get a sense of what it's going to take to reach your goal, and so you start slipping into more of that pessimistic mindset. You may be starting to realize the costs of this change, and you may be wondering if it's worth it. The next stage is called the Valley of Despair, and this is where people will often give up on their goals and just go back to the status quo. And it's in the name, right? This is where you're in the thick of things, you're really pushing through to make this change happen, you're starting to really face everything that it'll cost you, it's getting uncomfortable, and on the other hand, your goals, your outcome feels so far away at this point. For all of a sudden, you're not even sure if they are there in the first place. You're in this valley of despair and you're just experiencing all of the discomfort and none of the benefits yet. And if you don't manage to quit and you push through, then you enter the stage that is called informed optimism. You're informed because you know what it takes now and you've started to get into your groove and you're starting to see benefits. And so you're optimistic because you're thinking, okay, I can really do this. It's just on the horizon. If I keep pushing, I'm finally going to make it. And of course, if you keep pushing right till the end, you'll achieve your goal and you'll have the success and fulfillment, which is the final stage of this cycle. And so the reason I brought that up is that often when we are benefiting from a pattern, it's keeping us comfortable for the most part. And so the pattern that we're in keeps us from avoiding that valley of despair. Maybe we get there and then that's when we drop out and the pattern kind of restarts. If I think about the dieting example, uninformed optimism. I've just found this new diet or whatever. I'm going to try keto. I'm excited about it. This is going to be the one that works. Uninformed optimism, right? And then I start doing my meal prep. I start to realize, this is not that many carbs, or this is a lot of protein, or whatever. This is a lot of fat. And I start to be a little bit more pessimistic. And then if you start the diet and you're starting to get like sugar cravings or whatever, it's starting to get hard. You have to do the meal prep all the time. That's when you get to that valley of despair and you're starting to realize like, this is costing me comfort. This is uncomfortable. I don't like this. And you haven't lost any weight yet, or you haven't seen the results that you want. So that's really that valley of despair. And that's where it gets easy to just quit. It's like, it'll just be better and I can be more comfortable if I just go back to eating the way I was. And at this point, you can start to convince yourself that you don't really want that goal, or it's not really worth it, or you're not ready to give up, whatever it'll cost to get that goal. And so you quit and then the cycle restarts. And another non-weight loss example, of course, is, I was talking about playing small earlier in this video, and what does playing small actually do for me? Well, it keeps me safe and it also keeps me in my comfort zone. I don't have to take the big steps and step into my power, and I don't need to be seen and potentially judged or criticized or whatever by other people. It keeps me very safe. And so you can see how even though it doesn't seem like these patterns are benefiting you, usually they are just keeping you safe and comfortable, and there's no amount of uncertainty. And uncertainty is very uncomfortable as well. If you're thinking about quitting your job, then it's very uncertain. Like, what will happen at my next job? Will I like it? Will I be able to get another job? Like, there's so much uncertainty. Whereas if you just stay at the job that you don't like, even though you don't like it, you know what's going to happen. You know with certainty, like, what your day is going to look like. All right, so we're almost ready to get into the more exciting, planning and taking action stuff. But first I want to take a look at, how does this pattern break down? How does this pattern break down and actually not serve you? And how does this pattern, in the way that it breaks down, actually serve whatever it is that we discovered in the last step? How does it serve to keep you comfortable, to keep you safe, or keep you in some amount of certainty, or whatever else, whatever other reason you could have come up with that it's actually benefiting you in some way to stay stuck in this pattern? And one thing that is beneficial if you've been working on this specific goal and you've been stuck in a cycle for a long time is that you've gone around enough times that it starts to become clear what doesn't work, what you should be doing instead, and the actions that you may be avoiding, but you kind of know you should be doing them, but you're avoiding them because it keeps you safe or comfortable or whatever. And so if we look at my example of the dieting and exercise and stuff, I can see that, the impatient mindset going into it can lead to making kind of an extreme plan that isn't sustainable. And so that looks like dropping the calories too low, exercising too much, and eventually I just get like hungry and grouchy and tired and I just want to eat like a giant burger. And so clearly that is not sustainable and that doesn't work. And that's where my plan starts to break down. And so another area in the cycle is not just when I'm actively dieting, but it's when I kind of fall off the diet. And so instead of sort of like maintaining a steady weight when I'm off of a diet, I often would just start gaining because I wasn't very good at maintaining my caloric intake or whatever. I just wasn't good at maintaining. And so that would kind of trigger the need to go back on another diet because it was kind of this like cycle of like gradually gaining and not feeling great, and then dieting, and then sort of just like gradually gaining again. And so clearly there's two things that I needed to work on, which was being able to maintain a healthy weight so that I'm not always like going back on a diet. And I also needed to have a more moderate, sustainable approach when it came to dieting. And again, you can see how this approach really would benefit the part of me that didn't want to get uncomfortable, that didn't want to go through the discomfort that, going through a sustained, patient, step-by-step diet would take to ultimately get to my goal. I didn't have the patience for that, and I didn't really want to go through that discomfort, and I didn't really want to change my habits. So when you think about your own pattern, think about, what about this is not serving me? Where does it really break down? Where do I need to make the change? What can I learn from what I've tried in the past so that I can make a different choice moving forward? And for me, the thing that really stuck out is I can see clearly the actions that I should be doing that I'm actively avoiding because I know that they're going to be like hard and uncomfortable. Okay, so we're finally ready to start creating your action plan. And what I really like from the 12-week year is that they recommend focusing on 1 to 2 areas of your life or 1 to 2 goals and really focusing on those for 12 weeks. And if that feels a little bit limiting because you're like, there's so many things I want to work on, it's really important to remember that like you can only really do so much at a time. And if you spread yourself too thin, you're going to make not very much progress across the board. And there's more of a chance that you'll end up forgetting something because you're trying to do like 8 goals every day that you're working towards. And if you miss something or you forget and it slips, like say you like miss, a workout or you don't do something for your side hustle that you meant to do that day, it can kind of be demoralizing. But when you choose to do 1 or 2 things, it's really easy to be able to focus on those and show up for them every day and actually make consistent progress forward. And at the end of the 12-week cycle, you can always move on to your next goal or the next thing that you have in mind. It's not like you're not going to get to those things. You just have to focus on a couple things at a time so you can really make some headway. So when you're thinking about making your plan, it's really important to think about how will I do it differently this time? How will my mindset be different? And how will the actions that I take be different? And it's up to you to really determine what that needs to look like. You have to be honest with yourself, take a hard look at what you've been doing in the past and why it hasn't been working, and then think about, okay, what needs to happen instead? And another recommendation from the 12-week year is to come up with as few action tasks or tactics that will get you to your goal as possible. And so an example from my own is, let's talk about, showing up for YouTube. It's like, okay, I want to post a YouTube video every week consistently for 12 weeks. So what needs to happen? Like, what are my tasks that will make that happen? And for me, I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, and it was to work towards a video every day of the week. And so the task depends on what phase I'm in the process, right? It's like, am I brainstorming? Am I researching? Am I scripting? Am I recording? Am I editing, uploading? Like, it just depends, but I know what needs to be done on each day. And so for me, the simplest thing to break this down is to say, work on it every day. Whatever phase you're in, you work on that day. And these are the high value tasks that are actually going to move the dial towards your goal. These aren't, fluff. And in the 12-week year, they really say like, you only have 12 weeks to make this happen. So choose the most important things that are actually going to move the dial. And this really helps you focus, but it also helps you shorten your to-do list and make sure that it actually gets done. So you're making your action steps. So you've decided on your goal. You know how you're going to do it differently. You've chosen the tactics to make it happen. You've chosen the high value and the simplest number of tactics possible. And that's what you're committing to do every day for the next 12 weeks. And it doesn't have to be every day. It depends on the nature of, the goal. And so, for me, with the health and weight loss side of things, the tactics are to kind of narrow it down to the shortest list. It's going to be, hit my daily steps, drink the daily number, like the ounces of water that I want to hit, limit my calories to a certain number of calories, and then make sure that I'm like tracking everything. And finally doing a workout like 5 days a week. And so you can see that that's not going to be every day, but what are the weekly tactics that need to happen in order to reach your goal? And it's really important at this point to become aware of how your mind is going to try to take you off track, talk you into quitting, tell you that you don't actually really want this, or whatever other sneaky ways that your mind kind of derails you. And the reason this is important is because you need to be alert as to when these things come up, because it'll sound really reasonable. It'll sound like, yeah, you're right. Like your mind, you're going to be like, yeah, you're right. Like I can wait, or I can push that till tomorrow, or whatever. This isn't that important. But you have to be able to realize in the moment that like, wait, that's my mind trying to keep me in my comfort zone. That's my mind trying to keep me from finally reaching this goal because it's like a little bit scary to me or whatever. And an example of this can be when it comes to writing my YouTube script. Some weeks it really flows, I feel creative, it's like the idea just comes out and it's really easy and it's done. And some weeks it doesn't feel like that. Some weeks it's like pulling teeth. I don't want to sit down. I don't want to do it. I don't feel inspired. I don't feel creative. And in those days, it takes a little while to get settled, to really sit myself down at the desk and get settled and get into the task. And so my mind on those days, because my mind wants me to play small, even though I'm dedicated to not playing small anymore, that means getting out of my comfort zone. That means putting myself out there. And that's like a little bit scary. And so my mind doesn't want me to do that. And so it'll be like, oh, just grab a coffee before you get started, or just grab a little snack before you get started, or refill your water bottle. And it's like, these things sound reasonable, right? It's like, yeah, I should have a drink or whatever so that I can sit down for an hour and work. But it's like, okay, it takes me, like 5 minutes to make the coffee and like 10 minutes to do a little snack. And all of a sudden, the time gets creeping along. And then it'll be like, oh, just pop the laundry in so it can get going, or just turn on the dishwasher so that that can get going while you're working. And it's like, now it's like, I can see that these are like distractions. These are things that I do not need to be focusing on because they are not my main priority. And for me personally, I'm taking this approach of my main priority is what gets my energy first thing in the day. And so it's like, I'm not going to go do all the household chores because those aren't the top priority. My priority is, getting this script done. So that's what I'm going to do. And it's just being alert to the way that my mind will try and kind of talk me out of it, and to just know in those moments that it's like, oh, okay, this is just how I'd keep myself playing small. I'm not going to follow that. I'm going to sit down and get settled and really focus on this script. And even though it may feel like pulling teeth in the beginning, eventually I will get into a flow and it'll finally start to happen. And so finally, once you have your plan, you're ready to get into the taking action stage of things. And in the 12-week year, they say that this is so important because if you're having a 12-week period, every day counts. Every day is needed to move you towards your goal. And they talk about how you don't really have time to miss a day because they call it like missing a whole week, taking a whole week off if in the context of an entire year. And it's really important to know that in the beginning, it probably will take a little bit of willpower to get started, to not fall into the familiar patterns of the cycle that doesn't serve you, but to intentionally start to walk a new path and create new patterns and to build momentum in this new direction that's actually taking you where you want to go. But just rest assured that if you keep moving forward, you push through that valley of despair, that you will start to build momentum and habit behind your actions, and you won't need to consciously think about it so much or use willpower to make new choices. Eventually, you will get into a rhythm. So I hope that this video has been helpful. I hope it's outlined a new way of thinking about how you can approach your goals and achieving what you want, and it'll help you break out of those repetitive cycles and figure out what needs to change and how you can approach it this time with consistency and moderation so that you can really hit your goals. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate that support. And if you're into this type of content, then consider subscribing for weekly videos like this. And with that, I will see you next week.